discussion group question activity to follow each of those presentations in our fellowship hall, which is on the other side of the lobby. After the first presentation will help guide you in that direction. And then, on top of that, for those who have further questions or who, upon hearing some of this information, it really piques your interest more, we're going to be offering with Kylar a follow-up Zoom session online a week from Tuesday, September 30th at 7 p.m. If you're interested in being a part of that Zoom session, we have both in the back of the sanctuary here and in the fellowship hall a clipboard where you can write down your name and your email address, and we can make sure that you get sent that Zoom link ahead of time so you can be a part of it. Does all of that make sense? All right, wonderful. All right, so without further ado, I will introduce Kylar Barr to you. I encourage you to give him a warm round of applause for us. And I hope you enjoy.
I don't know, I'm disappointed, Nate. I was hoping there would be a seat right here for you so that they could watch your expressions the whole time. No, that's not how we're going to do it. Well, hello, everyone. It's good to see you. Like Nate said, my name is Kylar Barr. It's good to be here with you. I am married. My wife, Heather, is an elementary school teacher. And so we are both walking through these issues all the time. And we have 4 boys, 19, 18, 16, and 12. And so I am not coming here as someone who has figured everything out. I'm coming here as someone who's figured out some discussions we need to have. And so we're looking at ways to further our discussions on how we as churches, how we as community, how we as individuals can care for our students and young adults well. I'm glad we have some students here with us tonight because we are not just creating something for students. This is something we all need to work on together because it's for the good of not only the next generation, but all generations that we need to stop and say, okay, is what we're doing actually working for this generation? I think we'll see tonight the answer is no. I do get to go all over New England and work with youth and young adults. I get to support youth and young adult pastors. I get to see a lot of what's happening all over the region. And one of the things I've gotten to do is lead some discussions here on this topic. And I'm excited for it because, first of all, this generation is amazing. We have an amazing generation of young people coming up who are thriving in so many ways. As I connect with teens and young adults across the region, I'm filled with hope at all the different pockets of things that I see happening, of ways that they're engaging their community, of ways that they're stepping out and leading. It's fantastic. There are some major areas where they're not thriving. There are some major areas where they are not thriving. And so we want to pause and talk about some of those areas today. Now, why the anxious generation and why Jonathan Haidt? It's not the only resource we'll use today. We'll look at some information from some different things. But we're centering this around the discussion that his book has started because it's everywhere right now. It's everywhere right now. It's a powerful work that has people talking. Not everybody agrees, but it's started a really important discussion in our communities. We, in our own lives, went to the back-to-school things this year, and my wife's superintendent and my son's principal, both in their welcome back, mentioned the anxious generation. How many of you, just out of curiosity, how many have read The Anxious Generation? You've read the book. Okay, good. I'll breeze through some pieces. How many of you have just heard something about the book? Maybe you heard a podcast or something like that instead of read it? And how many of you, you're saying, I just came for the snacks. I don't know anything about this. Okay. All right, so it's nice to get a little starting point for where we are in the room on this. But it's an excellent work that identifies the problem, identifies the mental health crisis, makes some key observations about what's going on and some really significant contributors to that mental health crisis. And it doesn't stop there. It challenges us to look toward change for the good of the next generation, and change is needed. And so as we talk about this, I want to start with a slide that I put up at church this morning as we were talking. This is the background slide we're looking at. I don't know if you can see the picture well, but lost in the middle of all the emojis at the bottom is a young girl looking at her phone, being surrounded by these emojis and the things going. What words do you think of when you see that picture? See, there you go. We used that one this morning. Overwhelmed. What else? Trapped. Anything else? Lost, confusion, yes. We will talk about all of those things tonight. We are going to start with this idea of being anxious and overwhelmed. Being anxious and overwhelmed because there's so much that's coming this direction, so much that's hitting our students, our young adults, and if we're honest, us all the time as information comes at us. We can't escape this issue. We can try to ignore it. We can enter into solutions uninformed, but how much better would it be if we paused and actually had this discussion together? The next slide is a quote from the book that kind of gives a central theme that you'll see throughout the book. It says, "Our phones drown us in quantity while reducing quality." Our phones drown us in quantity while reducing quality. So we're looking at ways to actually say, okay, there's more, but it's not necessarily better. What do we do with all of this? And what is it doing to us? Haidt starts where we need to start. He identifies the problem. I'll just state it at first. Nate said it already, but our youth and young adults are in the middle of a mental health crisis. Our youth and young adults are in the middle of a mental health crisis. There's an organization called the Springtide Research Institute that has the information you'll see on this next slide. I won't read all of it for you. You can read some of it. But just a couple highlights. Nearly half of young people report being moderately or extremely depressed. 45% report being moderately or extremely lonely. Almost 2/3, 61%, agree with the statement, "The adults in my life truly don't know how much I'm struggling with my mental health." This is a group that studies 13 to 29-year-olds who have looked at these issues across the country, and these are the types of things that they're getting in their response to their survey data. Another group that does similar things is Barna. There's a slide behind me here. You may not be able to see all the pieces, but can I tell you, the green and blue at the top are people who are always uncertain about their future, right? And then on the other side, the bigger numbers are people who are never in these categories. So the things that we're looking at are uncertain about future, anxious about important decisions, afraid to fail, overwhelmed with responsibilities, and lonely. And as we look at that, we can see that we wish that graph was reversed, right? We wish that the always was low and the never was high for some of these things. And so the research keeps showing us over and over again that there's an issue that we're facing here. In the research that Jonathan Haidt and his team did, we see a couple different things. We'll see, there's a lot of graphs like this. I'm not going to give you all of them, don't worry. But we're going to look for just a second at some of the trends that we see. This first one is the U.S. anxiety prevalence, and it's by age. And so you can see the different generations there. The green is 50 plus, the orange is 35 to 49, the red is 26 to 34, and then the youngest generation they tested, 18 to 25, had a 92% increase in the prevalence of anxiety since 2010. A 92% increase. That's massive. The next slide here gives a similar picture with depression, major depression among teens, and we see that shaded area from 2010 to about 2015. We see that there's a peak that starts. It's more evident with the girls, but we can see that rise in boys as well. There's something that happened between 2010 and 2015. In fact, Haidt pinpoints 2012 as kind of a turning point. But what do you guys think as you think about life and all that happened in the 2010 to 2015 window might have changed this? I was talking to Nate earlier. He said he's a Jets fan. It has nothing to do with the Jets. We're okay. All right. Or the Patriots. What do you think might have happened between 2010 and 2015? Anybody? The iPhone, that's a piece of it. iPhone existed already, but some technologies changed in the iPhone. Most importantly, the invention of the self-facing camera, right? So the camera on the iPhone that we take selfies with was added in this time frame. What else might have shifted in this time frame to have this impact? I know some of you have read. You can give the answers anyway. Church attendance did change, though actually we're seeing a big trend in the other direction for church attendance right now. That's not the thing that he ties to this. The other thing that he ties to this, yes? Yeah, so the rise in social media and the internet, particularly, they didn't see as much change in all internet or all forms of social media, but particularly those that pair with that self-facing camera so that you can report on your daily activities all the time and watch everyone else's daily activities all of the time. And so we started to see some changes that coincide with this. Now, changes coinciding with something doesn't necessarily mean that it's the cause, but it is an important thing to notice and see. We started to have this phone-based childhood that he calls it, where so much of the time spent is spent in front of a screen, whether that's a phone or an iPad or a computer or whatever it is, and in activities that seem to be not helping us all of the time. Some are better than others, but in activities that seem to be helping us all of the time. But that's not the only factor that contributed to this. What Haidt is talking about is the rise in the phone-based childhood, but also the fall in something else, the fall in the play-based childhood. This idea is the idea that in the 80s and 90s, as we became more and more concerned with safety and more aware of the challenges that could exist around us, we saw news stories that were occurring of horrible things that could happen to our kids. There were things that you may have seen for commercials. It's 10 o'clock, do you know where your kids are? I might have gotten the time wrong. It's 10 o'clock, do you know where your kids are? We started to have milk cartons with missing kids on them that I would get at school when I'm going to school. So we start to see all these different things that could be coming for us, and there's a fear that starts to come, and we start to try to provide some safety naturally for our kids. But that safety also kept them from learning in some ways that you learn when you have unsupervised play, when you have that time together that you have to figure out things on your own. He actually talks about 3 phases of this process. The first one happened in the 60s and 70s and the beginning of the 80s, and that's the loss of community. The loss of community. As we see the rise of the internet, that wasn't 60s and 70s. As we see the rise of the highway system, is what I meant to say, we can travel a whole lot more. There was rising crime that people were worried about. Air conditioning allowed us to go inside instead of staying on the porch all the time. Television got better and more distracting for us, and we started to see community happen a little bit less. The play-based childhood was lost, as we said, in the 80s and 90s with fear and abduction and scandals that we saw on the news. And then the Great Rewiring, though it started earlier, really picked up here in 2010 to 2015 as we see that switch from the play-based childhood to the phone-based childhood. And so Haidt goes on to ask this question, what happened and why does it matter? I'm going to give you just a brief picture of these 4 foundational harms that he mentions. We actually call them the 4 foundational harms plus 1 because there's one that that kind of encapsulates a few of them that we'll talk about here. And then we're going to take a moment and kind of interact with each other on this. So don't worry, you can get up and get closer to people if you need to when we get to that moment. But as we look at this together, the 4 foundational harms that we see, the first one is opportunity cost. This is the one that's the plus 1. He lists the other 4 as separate ones, but this plus 1 is, he talks about quite a bit in the start of this. Every yes is a no to something else, right? If I'm doing one thing, I can't be doing another thing. And so there are opportunities that we lose with the phone-based childhood. It's the opportunities for other types of learning, for other things that we could be doing. We have a quote that you'll see up here by Thoreau. It says, "The cost of a thing is the amount of life which is required to be exchanged for it, immediately or in the long run." Immediately or in the long run. So here are the estimates. He estimates 3+ hours on social media. When you include YouTube, that's 5 to 6 hours a day on social media. Plus all the other apps that clamor for our attention, the numbers actually go to about 7 to 10, depending on which study you look. Plus school time, where depending on the classroom in the school, there's more that happens where you're interacting with screens there. But Haidt ignores that one, and he just gives a conservative estimate of 6 to 8 hours per day that we're seeing spent connected to screens, connected digitally. Now that doesn't mean it's 6 to 8 hours straight, and that doesn't mean it's every kid, but for every kid that it's 1 hour, right? That means there's another kid that it's a lot more. And so we're seeing a lot of things that could be happening in that time. Homework, teachers, could be happening in that time. Time with family, eating together, activities that we do, physical exercise. There's so much that could be possible in that time, and we just have to ask, is the benefit actually worth the cost? The next two that we'll go through quickly are things that we see that are types of opportunity cost. The first one is social deprivation. Social deprivation. We're going to go, there's a springtide findings slide that talks about the need for belonging. The need for belonging. Actually, as you look at this, I just want you to understand that belonging is something that sometimes we use words and we think that we know what they mean, but there's a generational gap in how these words are used. I actually worked with a friend of mine to talk to a group of pastors and leaders about this idea as we approach language where there's actually a language barrier between generations. We say one thing and we mean a different one. We see this, for example, in mentoring. One generation says mentoring and hears apprenticeship. Another one says mentoring and hears conversations in a coffee shop. These are different things that are happening. The same thing can happen with belonging. What the Springtide Research Institute found is that belonging actually is happening differently for students, for 13 to 25-year-olds. 1 in 3 feel completely lonely most of the time. 40% would say they have no one to talk to and feel left out. And 45% say that no one understands them. And yet we would say you're connected constantly. So what's happening here? Well, what the reports show is that you could come to an event and be on a team or in a class all year and never feel like you truly belong. It used to be that time spent together led to belonging, but now there are different connections that are needed. So how do we work with this to where we can help people feel known and like they're a part and like they belong, like there's something worth connecting to? Haidt has this graph that talks about the social deprivation problem as well, that is about time spent with friends. And we can see that from 2003 to 2021, the average daily time in minutes has just gone down. It's a little bit for all generations, but for the youngest generation, the 15 to 24-year-olds, it's gone from about 150 minutes all the way down to about 40 minutes of time a day spent connecting with friends. And we wonder why there is a social difficulty as we're connecting. We're just not spending time together. Another deprivation is sleep deprivation. How much sleep do you think teens need? Somebody tell me. 10 hours. What else? Teens, how much sleep do you think you need? 1 hour? Is that what I heard? No, it's not 1 hour. Studies show it's about 9 to 9.5 hours. 10 I would take, but about 9 to 9.5 hours. This graph that we're going to look at that Haidt has is just 7 hours of sleep, so less than needed. And it's from 1979 to now, and this is the percentage that say they sleep less than 7 hours a day. Again, we see the same trend. Our sleep is disappearing. Think of all the different things that impacts. It's a compounding cost. Sleep deprivation is a problem. One of the ways that we know that this is tied to our consumption of media and digital connecting and all of this is that the companies that bring this to us know it. Netflix is one of the companies that maybe has kept you from sleep once in a while. You're watching Netflix and you get to the end of the show, or at least I get to the end of the show, and it says next episode starting in and counts down. I don't even wait for it. I click start, right? But it just keeps going, and all of a sudden you find you've watched 4 episodes instead of 1 episode. And so we end up having these moments where we meant to go to bed at 10, and all of a sudden it's midnight, and we end up with sleep deprivation. The Netflix CEO recognized this. In a meeting he was having with his leaders, he actually said, we are competing with sleep. We are competing with sleep. There are 2 more foundational harms that I want to hit of the phone-based childhood. The next one is attention fragmentation. Attention fragmentation that he talks about. There's a story he references by Kurt Vonnegut where they want to help in this dystopian future society. They want to help everybody kind of be the same. And so what they do is they take the most intelligent people, the ones who are the most productive and accomplishing the most stuff, and they put something in their ear that is going to distract them with a buzz every so often. In the story, they do this so that they can't operate at their peak capacity. Feels kind of like what we've done to ourselves, right? We get distracted by this buzz every so often, and it pulls our attention every time. Lest we think that this is just kind of related together by chance or circumstance, there is a causal relationship to it too. It's not just correlation. When we look at the studies that are done, they actually did one with phones where if you have your phone out on the table, in your pocket or bag in the room, or out in another room, there's a difference in your attention level that you can pay. What they did was they took people and assigned them one of those 3 categories and gave them the same task. And sure enough, the ones whose phone was out of the room performed the best and had the most attention. The ones for whom it was in the bag or the pocket was the second most. And the ones who could see it on the table, it was incredibly harming for their attention and their ability to produce on the test. We can see attention fragmentation as an issue. And then the last one is addiction. Addiction is a problem because of easy dopamine hits. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter that actually helps us with wanting. We say it feels like it's happiness and satisfaction, but it's actually a happiness that leads to wanting. Hey, I want more of that thing. Here's a good thing that I liked. I want more of that thing. And that's super helpful until it kicks into overdrive. Until we want more and more and more. And we've always had issues with this. We can do it with food. We can do it with all sorts of different things. It's it's what comes behind drug addiction and all sorts of other addictions that we've talked about as this cycle that we get caught in with these dopamine hits. But the problem with social media and the problem with what we're working toward here is that they are fast, easy dopamine hits. A lot of times you have to work for those things. If it's food, you at least have to, maybe you don't have to cook, but you at least have to hit the microwave or go to the fridge and get something. There's a little bit that's going on there. But in most things in our life, if we want that reward, we actually have to work for it. I think of my son Cameron, who plays volleyball. He was playing for his team, and he really wanted to learn to jump serve. So he's practicing his jump serve over and over again. And he'd toss the ball up in the air, and he'd jump and hit it, and every once in a while, it would go just perfectly. Every once in a while, it would go just perfectly, and he would be excited and spurred on to do more and go for it. But what happened eventually as he kept practicing? He got better, and he got tired. And when he got tired, he couldn't keep going. Can I tell you, I can do this for a long time. I can doom scroll over and over and over again. So there are all these opportunities to run into problems with addiction. We see this actually in the way that social media and gaming use systems of behavioral conditioning in their algorithms and in their process for connecting us. The hooked model is a model that he mentions. There's a picture for this one, I believe, where we see in the first thing there's this action that we step into that has a variable reward. We don't know exactly what that reward will be, but there will be a variable reward. And if we're invested in it, it triggers this positive response, right? And so let's take this to social media. We post something, that's our action, and we're going to get a variable reward. Are people going to like it? Are they going to comment on it? Are they going to ignore it? What's going to happen here? We are invested in it because it's about us, and therefore it kicks us right back into checking it, checking to see what happened, looking back at it, and then as we look back at it, we get another reward because we look back and we see what happened, and we get caught in this cycle with the hooked model. What happens here is that this variable ratio schedule, where you don't always get the perfect result, keeps you coming back. Think about games on your phone. Anybody ever play a game on your phone? Just about every one of them does this. As you're playing the game, you're going to get to the spot where you just about think you're going to win. You're going to get that reward, and then you're not quite there. It's going to happen. And so it didn't work the first time. The next time you play, and you do get it, what happens immediately? There's another round. It's never over. I think we have someone I was talking to the other day who was on Royal Crush, and they were at like level 2,000 as they're playing. It doesn't end, right? And so you keep coming into these things, and there's variable levels of reward, but it's just enough to keep you going. What happens here is that we take this easy dopamine and we keep wanting these things over and over and over again. With social media, with video games, with pornography, they are fast, easy rewards that we can find in these digital spaces that don't give us that long-term satisfaction. And so they keep us coming back, they keep us wanting. And so as we look at all these issues, I know that's been a lot. I want to actually have some conversation. I wanted to catch us up a little bit, but I want to have a little conversation with you. And so you may need to move around for this, but I want you to help me out a little bit. As we look at these four foundational harms plus one: opportunity cost, social deprivation, sleep deprivation, attention fragmentation, and addiction, I want you to gather with a few people around you. And what I want you to talk about is this question: which of these do you see having the greatest impact on the next generation in your context? In your context, which one stands out? Which one of the harms is the most harmful? Is it opportunity cost? Things they could be doing that they aren't? Get specific about it. Is it social deprivation and the inability to stay connected as we are, as we should be? Is it sleep deprivation, that we're tired all the time? Is it attention fragmentation, that we're distracted all the time? Or is it actually addiction, that we keep coming back even though we don't want to? Take a second and just connect with each other, and I'll ask you which one stood out the most here. I want to hear from you guys kind of which ones are the highlights in just a second. On your mark, get set, go. If you end up with two, I won't take points off. You can talk about more than one of them if you need to. All right, I know if I gave you 5 more minutes, you could solve all the problems of the world. But I do need to hear some of these things from you. What did you talk about? What are some of the things that stand out? Some of the some opportunity costs, social deprivation, sleep deprivation, attention fragmentation, or addiction. Which one? And we've got a mic that Joe can bring around to you. Somebody be bold and raise your hand. I can hear you. They are interconnected, that's true.
The other things do lead to long-term problems because you can't, develop the way you're supposed to develop.
Okay. If you were going to pinpoint one that you're seeing a lot in your area, who's got some? Because they all are, like you're saying, intertwined. They develop. Who else has something you talked about? Yeah.
So we're like elementary and middle school, but we were talking about that we're seeing with our students just their ability to stay focused. So that attention, it used to be like when I started teaching, it's like kids could spend, a long amount of time doing an activity. Now it's like, we got to constantly be moving to the next thing to keep them engaged.
Well, there are things that can grab our attention, right? And that can grab students' attention. There are things that you can pay attention to for a long amount of time. But there are also so many things that pull our attention away. What do you have for us?
I was going to say similar to Shelby in terms of attention fragmentation. I'm a high school teacher, and so just that ability to focus on a task, but the opportunity to put work into that task, to really to dig deep into what you're trying to accomplish and not be distracted by something else that's going to come up and pull your attention in that direction. And we've come up with tools and things to help you with that, where an AI thing can do it for you quickly, but the quality of that thing is going to decrease as your inability to focus on it for a long period of time decreases as well. So the products that we're putting out are going to go down, the attention we put into it is going to go down.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? I was thinking about what I'm going to eat for dinner later.
Yeah.
No, no, you don't have to repeat it. That's great. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else have one that they want to share that stood out to them?
Yeah, we were talking as a group, and the youngest suggested that sleep deprivation was a number one culprit. And I know from being a grandmother and having grandchildren live with me, bedtime isn't as well defined as it used to be. It used to be, at a certain point, lights went out, doors were closed, good night. Now they've got a TV in their room, they've got iPads, and you'll suddenly walk by the room and you'll see there's a light coming from underneath the door, or it just seems as though they're less defined moments. And the opportunity costs of when kids are involved with all kinds of activities, after school activities, it seems as though dinner time is also not a defined thing where you gather together. Too often it's in the car on your way home so that they have time to maybe make bedtime or maybe make homework. And there's a lot of other distractions that seem to be vying for the same little mind that we're trying to help grow.
Yeah, Haidt would say that community diminished. I think it did. I also think the community changed, where all of a sudden proximity didn't equal community. And so our community might be somebody who's on the hockey team an hour away that we're with 3 times a week, right? But that hour to get there has a cost, right? It's something else that we're adding on. Anybody else somebody wants to share? We have time for 1 or 2 more. Yes, in the back. Got to make Joe move, right?
Yeah, so I would say for me, sleep deprivation and maybe also opportunity cost. There's this website called cars.com.
Oh, yeah.
And
I got a few tabs open.
It's caused some sleep deprivation for me because my contractor friends, sometimes when I go to work early, they'll see that I'm tired and they'll say, "Were you counting cars again last night?"
Yes, counting cars is not the same as counting sheep.
Yeah.
Okay, we got that.
But that's what I'm saying. And so, but the good thing is I have not downloaded the app yet,
Okay,
but I've gone to their website probably hundreds of times.
there you go.
So
It's
I'm glad I'm
easy
here
for all
tonight.
of us.
Yeah.
Easy for all of us, for sure. He's right beside you. One more. Who's got us? Give us one more thing that stood out to you in your conversations. Yes, right here.
We were talking a little bit about a couple of them, but opportunity cost is the big one for me. When I go out to a restaurant and I see families with the missed opportunities for socializing with their kids and talking and expecting children to learn how to eat at a restaurant, to learn how to navigate the social world outside of their homes is lost when there's screens popped in their hands all the time. So I feel like the social skills of our kids are really decreasing because of those missed opportunities.
That's good. Well, thank you. It's not the last discussion we'll have. We probably won't solve all the problems of the world tonight, but the hope is that it's a starting point for these conversations that happen. But as we look at these problems, it leads us to some other questions. It leads us to some other things that we kind of need to look through that talk about, okay, so what is it that really is happening here? One of the things that you may have seen is that, just to make sure we're all on the same page as we move forward, is that the graph is a little bit different for boys and girls here. The graph is a little bit different for boys and girls here. The boys' graph was moving up much more slowly, but for a longer time. The girls' graphs were shooting up, starting in 2010 to 2015. Why could that be? What Haidt suggests is that there are two things that are happening: agency and communion. And boys tend toward agency, and girls tend toward communion. It's fairly consistent between genders. We see this. It's 2 chapters. I won't go into it all. Don't worry, I won't read it. But I am going to give you one quote here that kind of helps encapsulate it, that will get us there. It says, "Agency arises from striving to individuate and expand the self, and involves qualities such as efficiency, competence, and assertiveness. Communion arises from striving to integrate the self in a larger social unit through caring for others, and involves qualities such as benevolence, cooperativeness, and empathy." Here's the thing you need to understand. The studies are showing not that this is affecting girls more than boys or boys more than girls. It's showing that it's impacting them slightly differently. They're getting to the same spot, but they're getting there in different ways. What we see is that for boys, these agency things tend to be things more like in video games, when you're being able to have that action that you're taking on things. Pornography, all of these other cases where you're online and you're actually like debating and confronting people could be these things. There's this agency that you're trying to assert there. While that did increase between 2010 and 2015, because some of that is available on social media, right? It wasn't the primary thing. It actually started a long time before that, when everything started to be available on the internet and readily available for games and all of those things. I was in the generation that moved from Atari to Nintendo and all the way up. It kept getting better, and we kept spending more time on it. And so those things are impacting us in similar ways to the things that are impacting girls. When we look at communion needs are met quickly and easily by social media. Hey, I'm connected here. I have input from others. I'm able to see how how not only I compare, but how I can interact and relate. And we see these things in social media being there, and it's right there on your phone all the time, but you get overwhelmed by all of it, and you start looking at things that are the wrong ones, and all of a sudden, it starts to be this tool where your very real need for communion has been hijacked by almost a fool's gold communion on social media. So as we look at this, there are some real implications, but what we run into is that it's led to a spot where both boys and girls are reporting a feeling of hopelessness that's been rising in that same period. 2010 to now, we see it just rising up and up, until just recently. Recently, there's a push back against this. The generation that's here is saying, no, this is enough. We need hope. And so we need to look at some different ways that this can come. One of the things that Haidt actually suggests, he is not someone who's a person of faith himself. He describes himself as a secular Jewish atheist. But he would suggest that there are spiritual practices that can help with this. As he looked at faith communities all over the world, he would look at spiritual practices, things that we talk about in Christianity as spiritual disciplines, right? And he lists 6. We could list more, but these things that help us refocus, that help us prioritize, that help us look at things differently. Practices like solitude, practices like prayer, practices like worship. All of these things help us to focus on something outside ourselves, where all of the things coming at us in our hand or on the screen are telling us, no, focus on what you need and what you want and what you need to get and how it impacts you. And a turning back out from that is helpful. It doesn't mean, again, that there aren't good things that are happening on social media. I have friends who are using social media to remind people about all of the different ways that we can connect to something that is more than us, that is more important than our needs, that is bigger than us. But there's a cost, too. It's not the predominant thing that's happening in a lot of these cases. He talks about this idea of elevation and degradation, that some things help us to kind of look up in awe at things that matter more, right? You have that look at the ocean here, the look at the mountains where you say, wow, there's something bigger than me. But other things cause us to look down and just focus on what's right in front of us, to look at the baser things and the baser needs in life. And what he asserts is that many of the things that are coming at us every day in the phone-based childhood and our phone-based adulthood for many of us are things that point us toward that degradation. It's much harder to get that sense of awe that we can get sometimes when we step into some of these spiritual practices. And so we have a second discussion question I want to spend a little bit of time with. And whether you are here, thank you for all of you coming, those of you who are part of this church, those of you who are from the community, whether you are a person of faith or not, I would love to know your answer to this question. It doesn't have to be just the spiritual disciplines we would talk about here. It could be any rhythm, anything, any practice in your life. What practices or rhythms in your life help you slow down and gain perspective? And I am going to make a list. And so if we can have that mic, if you can raise your hand, I want to hear the types of things that help you slow down and gain perspective. What practices do you do that can practically help here?
Go for a walk.
A walk. I'm going to warn you, my wife is the teacher. Her handwriting is a font. I hope I can read mine. All right, so a walk. What else do we have? Gardening. Give me another one. Sunsets. Devotions. Prayer. Yes. Reading.
Sunday morning worship at Brewster Baptist Church.
Selfless plugs. No, that's good. Worship. Meals. Shared meals. Small groups, conversations. Fishing. Is it fishing or catching? No, we won't go on that. All right. Volunteering. Who else has one? Retreats. Writing, which I'm doing messily right now. Oh, not that kind of writing. I'm too tall. I can't write on the bottom of it. Well, keep going. Anybody else have one? Deep freezing?
Deep breathing.
Oh, deep breathing.
Or-
I speak at a camp called Deep Freeze sometime, and I'm like, I've never heard that as a verb, but that's okay. Deep breathing, breathing. All right, we're to the bottom of where I can write for a second, and my hand's getting tired. You guys know some of these things that happen. One of the things that we run into a lot is that we get to a point like this, and we say, okay, what do we do? What do we do about this? And I would argue, as I look at the time, not check my social media, I would argue that we already know a lot of the things to do, right? You came up with a list we could write a book about just like that. The question is, how do we actually get to a place where we'll do them in our lives? We've talked about the problem a little bit here. We'll hit a little bit more problem in the second session. But in the second session, there will be a lot more discussion because we're going to be looking at, hey, how do we actually practically walk toward a solution? We'll talk about some solutions that Haidt proposes, but we'll say, how do I actually practically walk toward a solution? Right now, we're going to take about, 8 minutes? We're going to come back together at 6:30 here in this room. And we're going to use the restroom. We'll come right back to here. We won't do discussion in the other room this time. We'll hold that until at the end for time's sake. But just use the restroom, hang out, get reoriented, move your seat to different people if you didn't like your conversations before. No, you don't have to do that. But we'll just take about a 8-minute break and come back here at 6:30 to work together on this a little bit. Make sure you sit in spaces where you can go and maybe share with somebody something that you do to kind of help in this process to get our brains moving even a little more. Thank you.
loves theater, and so then it turned this big thing, and then, it was awesome. Like a congregation or whatever. You call it congregation. The congregation of like and
Oh my gosh.
it was so fun.
I would be so.
Are you gonna do any theater?
I don't know. My kids are still like in the mode of like, my son is in golf and my daughter's in field hockey and
How old are they?
everywhere. So 10 and 14.
Okay,
My son
yeah,
is
you're in the thick of it.
I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm a crazy person.
Yeah.
And so I don't have 5 seconds to do a thing for me except for go to a show.
Yeah.
So I'm like all about seeing every show
Yes.
before,
That's
that
awesome.
I can. And so it's great because here there's so many theaters and every, every show. I'm like, but I would love to be in something someday.
Just do it. Are you involved in talk? Why did I think it was Shakespeare and now it's like, but it's musical, right?
You're adding music.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
into it. I think it's like
Judy posted like a
it's like
clip and I was like,
moments
oh.
of things. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. I don't know what they're doing. I haven't seen it.
I have tickets. I have
Oh, do you?
Yes, for next week. Yeah. So, I don't know. I don't know anything about theater like really. Like I know.
I know nothing about it.
I know.
Yeah, I don't
Like
either.
Shakespeare.
Yeah, I don't know anything.
I heard it's fun.
Yeah. Oh, I heard
It
it's
looked
fun.
like
You
it
wouldn't
was,
think it
yeah.
would be, but it's it is.
So I'm like, I'll just try it.
Yeah. Oh, I'm down.
What happens? Yeah. So
What's your next thing? Or are you in it now?
Young Frankenstein.
It is about that time. At 6:31, so I gave you an extra minute. You can thank me later, okay? But as we move forward in this, I was talking to Nate in the break. The first session, it's always this dance, right? Because we've got people in the room who've read the book and are experts yourselves in a lot of ways, and we've got people who are just hearing about this for the first time. There is far more in the book, for those of you who haven't read it, that can give some evidence for this, to link the changes that we've seen in technology and our use of it to this rise in overwhelm and anxiousness, at the same time as we've had this decrease in free play and this kind of play-based childhood. We've seen so many shifts in our culture that happen alongside that. We talk about bringing back a play-based childhood. We'll talk about that a little bit here. But in my community, that's hard if I want to step into this. Because I live in a community where we've had police called because people let their kids play in the front yard. Right? I live in a community where when I was growing up, if I was stupid while I was out somewhere, someone would tell me about it, and then my parents would know when I got home. Right? We don't have those same relationships right now. What will happen if people kind of correct someone's kids in my town, where they're hanging out at the Starbucks together, is they'll get blasted on Newtown Neighbors Unite, because we're a nicer Newtown, right? And so we see all these different things that make it harder, even the lack of relationships, right? There aren't as many people working together right now to care for our kids, to care for young people. And so what do we do in this space? I want to pause and look at the slide again that we started at the beginning. Overwhelm and anxiousness is one of the things that we heard here, but the other one is kind of this idea of under attack. Right? It looks like she's about to drown in some of those things. And there's another quote from Jonathan Haidt that really, to me, sums up the second part of his book, at least what he's driving toward here. It's minors should be protected from products that are designed to addict them. He's not writing to fix all of our problems with social media as adults. He says he's looking for freedom for us to do whatever we want in that scenario. I think I need help. I think all of us need help in this process. We need to help each other. But he's saying, hey, especially for minors, if there are things that are designed to addict them, designed to do them harm, there should be some protection from those things. And so we're turning to each other now and we're saying, okay, so what does that protection look like? What do we do? How do we actually accomplish anything? Because if this problem is real, if from 2010 to 2015, anxiousness and overwhelm and depression and self-injurious behavior and suicide attempts and all of these things started skyrocketing, isn't it too late? I mean, Kylar, if you're telling me that my phone and my social media and all of that stuff is impacting this in some way, those things are out there. I can't just not have a phone, can I? Like, what happens here? What's going on? And so we start to run into this question of what can we actually do? Haidt ran into one of the big criticisms that Haidt has heard as he goes and speaks around different places. Is it's just too late to change things. And you'll get these analogies like the plane has already left the airport. The train has already left the station. I love the point that I've heard him make where he says, you know, if I'm on a plane that's left the airport and I find out there's a problem with the engine, I want it to turn around and go back. If I'm on a train that's left the station and I find out there's a problem with the bridge ahead, I want us to stop, right? And go back to the station or get off the train. Like there is a time to say, hey, this is a problem that's big enough that we can't just say it's too late. We can't just say this has already started. The problems that we face can be good because they can lead us towards some actual solutions when we say, hey, this is enough of a problem that we need to change something, right? We need to actually change something about what's going on. Excuse me. And so it's important to realize, though, that one of the huge challenges to this is that we don't really feel like we can impact it on our own. If I change something about the way I use things, it might help me a little bit, but as a parent, if I tell my kid they can't have their phone at school, they'll miss out on so much. They'll miss out on things in their class, won't they? They'll miss out on things that their friends are doing. There's so much going on. That stuckness that we feel when we look at these things is because what we're dealing with is a collective action problem. A collective action problem. It's a problem where three things are true. People would benefit from working together toward a common goal. Individual self-interest prevents them from doing so. And the goal is hindered or is not achieved. You see those three things? We'd all benefit if this happened, but it's hard for me at first. And so it doesn't happen. There are some examples of this. I'll go into one in just a minute. But I think, I'm looking around the room, I think we've got a bright group here. What I want is for you to gather together in groups, and I want you to come up with a great example of a collective action problem, if I can speak there. A collective action problem. What's an example of a collective action problem from real life? I'm going to give you about 4 minutes in your group to narrow it in on one, something that it would be better for us if we all work towards a common goal. But for individuals, it can be difficult, and therefore the goal is hindered or not achieved. On your mark, get set, go. 4 minutes you're not solving it, you're just telling me the problem. Go. It can be related to this or unrelated. I heard some things about fishing earlier. It could be related to fishing.
Hard not to be in the mindset of phones right now.
I think that lots of our societal issues, housing,
Yeah.
food insecurity,
Yeah, definitely.
environmental issues, all of those things. If everybody would just do one thing towards the benefit of the community,
Yeah.
we'd
Yeah.
be much further along in society. Global warming, for sure.
I think it's so hard with the phone thing because there's so many layers to it.
I heard a lull in the conversation. Have you come up with all of them? No, I'll give you another minute. I'll give you another minute. Each group is coming up with a collective action problem they can share with us. I want actual collective action problems. They don't have to be related to this. So it could be something where, hey, here's the problem that we run into all the time where we keep having this issue because we won't all do the thing that would help us if we all did it. Or it could be something where it's hypothetical. That's fine too. Something that you could see and see a solution for. Did that answer your question? Probably not. Here, I'll.
They went into lockdown every other week, so she just really developed this anxiety over whether her child was safe. And this is kids. Some things. Like, we're not immune to the problems of the world, but how can we help you to feel safer? Let me tell you about our, protocol for if there is an emergency. Like, you need to have faith in the adults that are caring for your kid. And not like watch it.
Orleans gangs.
Right? Harwich Heat. Remember that? They thought they were a gang. But I think if parents all came together, it has to be like smoking, right? Like, as a society, we have to look at this problem collectively and say, we're all gonna, it's gross, and we need to do something about it. Otherwise, it's really hard as a parent. Like, I know, like, Logan, from the time he was in middle school on, every sporting event, the coach said, we don't talk to the parents, we talk to the kids. So if he didn't have a phone for him, the coach couldn't text him to practice. And when I was like, well, text me, and not for nothing, but my kid can't drive. So if you're going to have changes, like, talk to the driver, right? Like, I'll make sure he gets there. But it was a misguided attempt at having kids have more
Agency.
Yeah, right?
Right.
Yeah, exactly. But it's yeah. It's tough.
Well, and it's just so funny because it's like,
All right, I know this is
make my kids.
this is a little bit of a test tonight, but who thinks they can come up with a collective action problem? Who thinks that you had one in your group? Nate's got one. What we got? Do we have a mic for Nate that I can give him? Joe's coming.
So last Sunday, instead of a standard Sunday sermon, we had a kind of a dialogue with one of the members of our leadership council and Pastor Doug about environmental concerns, right? And we talked about reducing plastic. So I was just talking with the students about, okay, right, we would all be collectively better off if we, if we use less plastic for the sake of the environment that we live in. But the moment that I turn that on you, Kylar, and say, all right, you start, right, it proves to be a lot more difficult of a task.
Yeah, it impacts my convenience. It impacts what I'm trying to do in that moment. And so all of a sudden, my self-interest outweighs all of our interest, and it's a collective action problem. Who else has one? We got one back here.
We were talking about, or I was talking about gun violence as a collective action problem, where everybody knows it's a problem, but because we often politicize the issue in both directions, nobody wants to come to any sort of collective solution on how to move forward with the problem. We just see the issue as a divisive issue, as I need to take this side to solve the problem, or you're going to take that side to solve the problem, and there's no coming together to say, like, how do we fix this together? How do we make progress? How do we make a change towards this issue versus just becoming stalled by our anger and frustration at other people with the issue?
I like that you mentioned gun violence. Any of these that can become political in nature and we start arguing back and forth on, one of the problems that's exacerbated by the way we interact with each other on social media is that they can become polarized and we're arguing about the extremes of something. Instead of taking the simple step in the middle that would help a little bit and a little bit and a little bit, we get frozen by the argument about all the possibilities out here. And so that's a great example of a collective action problem. Any others that people have they want to share?
Ours was similar to the gun problem. It was just politics in general being so divisive, and that especially if we feel alone, I think then we just feel like we're powerless. But there's so much division. It's like, where do you even start to come together? We know we'd all benefit if we could do what we used to do and compromise and cross the aisle. I mean, people in power don't get anywhere because they're just, they want to be right. They just want their money, their power, whatever. But that was the problem that first came to my mind, and it's related to the guns, I guess.
Well, yeah, our world would be better if politics was handled this way, but I'm more likely to get elected if I handle it this way.
Yeah.
And so politics as a whole isn't handled the way that would make our world better. And we run into that problem that could happen. Right. So there's a self-interest that exists there, too. Can I give us one that's a little less heavy? You ready for it? Here's the one that you need to see. Go ahead and show them this collective action problem. It's the zipper merge. It's the zipper merge. There are actual tests on this that estimate that we would save about 40% of our traffic time if we would just learn to merge like a zipper. That every car alternates and comes together when lanes are closing, and all of a sudden, here we go. But how many people does it take to mess up the zipper merge? One, right? And it's never just one. You see the one, and then you're like, well, I'm not going to be the one that's back here. And all of a sudden, we're racing each other, and we're not getting anywhere. And so the zipper merge, just alternate when merging people. It'll help all of us. Okay, that's really all I came here to say tonight. I actually had that happen on the way here. I was traveling Friday night to come here, and there was construction that was happening on the road. And this one went from 4 lanes down to 1 lane. And instead, people made 6 lanes. That doesn't work, right? It wrecks the whole system. And we were there forever. We were at a dead stop, right? All because we couldn't just work together. Because we couldn't work together for the common good, because you guys have to understand, I'm in a hurry, I got something going on, right? Our personal need outweighed the collective need, and it ended up not doing any of us any good, because we can't do the zipper move. And the problems we're talking about here are a lot more serious, right? It's more than just I know it's hard to believe, but it's more than just the impact of the zipper move. We're talking about problems that are leading to a mental health crisis in our world right now. There are 2 major collective action problems that Haidt points out. The first one is the decline of play-based childhood. The decline of play-based childhood. We see this system where he would argue that we need more freedom in the physical world. We talked about this a little bit already. But let's think about why it's a collective action problem. If I just send my kids out for play-based childhood and nobody else does, is it fun to play together? There is no together. Right? That's an extreme version of it, right? But we're operating in a world where we can't just as a family say, hey, this is the solution. We're going to set you into a world where there's more play-based childhood. Things have shifted. Our world is not designed in a way that allows this anymore because of the way our road systems work and because of the fear that we have about all the different things that we know could happen in our physical world, even if statistically they're far less likely than a lot of the things that we don't fear in the digital world. And so me just changing equals my kids being left out, right? My son couldn't communicate with the other volleyball players because he didn't have Snapchat and he was missing stuff all the time. What do you do there? I mean, I can fuss at them about it, but all right, how do we use this, son? What's going to happen here? How do we monitor it as a family? What does this look like? And it gets exhausting, right? Because we're in a world that's set up one way, and we're saying, no, it would be better to be this way. But it's a collective action problem because it would be better for all of us if the world would just take a step over this way. And yet it's better for me in the moment if I keep doing the things that I've been doing. The second one that we look at is this rise of phone-based childhood. He would argue we need more protection in the virtual world. We were very aware of physical dangers in the last several decades, but we were not as aware of some of the dangers that exist online, of some of the problems that we can run into, not just of mental health, but of all the nefarious things that people can be a part of all of the things that can happen as we interact online in ways that are not helpful or healthy for us, right? One of the first ways I got connected with this issue was I had a superintendent from a school system near us that came to me as the youth pastor and said, hey, we're seeing these problems in our schools. We're having kids go home and they're talking on social media and they're getting in arguments and fights and bullying's existing and they can't solve the problems on their own and they don't know how to walk through this and work toward peace. Are you seeing the same problem? Well, yes, we are. Absolutely seeing the same problem. Because we're sitting here walking in a space where there's not as much protection in the virtual world as there would need to be. It's a collective action problem because it's the norm for people to be connected online. It's the norm. They already have the app. They already have the thing. YouTube is so easy. We love the cute videos of the kids who can already swipe, right? But what are the dangers that are happening in these things? And what's lost when we can't walk through the solutions together? When you put those two changes that are needed together, you have this great rewiring that Haidt is talking about, where we've moved from that play-based childhood to the phone-based childhood, and we have to acknowledge that it's too big for any of us to solve on our own. I can't just solve the problem. We collectively need to solve the problem because collective action problems require collective responses. Collective action problems require collective responses. We need to work together to build enough momentum to actually shift things, or our short-term self-interest will keep taking over, right? And so we're not very good at delayed gratification. Our short-term interest takes over often. But I want us to think about ways that different groups of us could be part of a solution for this. Who's the we that needs to work together? If I'm saying we need to work together to come up with solutions, the first step is to say who's the we that should be in the room. And so my question for you that we're going to make another handy-dandy list together, that I want to make a list together of, is what types of groups or individuals might have a role to play in this collective action solution? Who needs to come together? I'll give you the first one. We're standing in a church. Churches, good job, guys. That was a great answer. Churches can come together as part of this. I'll give you another one. We've talked a lot about this place that kids go all the time to learn. What's that one? Schools. Yes, schools should get together to be a part of the solution. Okay. All right, I'm done with my hands. Give me some more. What else? Parents. Coaches, I heard. What is it? Businesses. Students, kids. Counselors. What else? Politicians, government. I'll just put government. That's an easier abbreviation. What else we got? Families. Neighbors. That's great. Law enforcement. Took us about 3 minutes to come up with a list that's fairly substantial. I bet if I gave you a few more minutes, you could come up with some more. There are a lot of people that have roles to play in this. And one of the difficulties is that it's really hard sometimes to get all of these people together. We say that we want a collective action solution, but we never have times when we can stop and say, okay, what does that solution look like? And we don't necessarily have formats where we can stop and say, what does that solution look like? One of the problems is we say, a great format for this, we could do this online. We could post about it. We could share things, and that is great. There's a positive that comes there. But because of the way that social media is designed and even our search engines are designed, what we see are things that the algorithms think we'll like. And because of that, it's things that are like us. And so if we're parents, all of a sudden you start seeing things from other parents. But you may not see things that are from law enforcement. If you're a counselor, you see things from counselors, but you may not see something that's about the government. If you're in the church, you might see posts from the church and information from people in the church, but you don't see things about schools. And we get isolated, and we never get to come together to even talk about this collective action problem. And then once we do connect with each other and decide to work together, we have this other question: what do we actually do? Do we smash all the phones and shut down the internet? I see one head shaking. Probably not. That's probably a little more than we're going to do. Haidt has some suggestions for what we do, but before we get there, I just want to thank you for coming out tonight and having some of these conversations, because being in a place where we can talk about these things is a huge step. Especially when it's not just one group getting. I know most of you are part of the church, but for those of you who don't attend this church and came here to be part of this conversation tonight, thank you. Because in-person conversations are what's going to help this. It's not when you post online so that the people who already agree with you can see it. It's when you step across the road and talk to your neighbor. It's when you go to the coffee shop and talk to the person that you connect with there. It's when you talk to the other parent on the sports team. That's when you start to see these different things happen. When we're willing to have these conversations in our everyday world as we interact with people who don't see the same thing that we see all the time. Once we get these people together, we can start to say, okay, so what are some things that we can do? I won't make you give us the answer to that yet. It's coming. I'll start by sharing what Haidt says. He gives a couple broad things that he suggests for 4 foundational reforms. We won't talk about all these a lot. I'll just share them. His first one that he's suggesting is no smartphones before high school. No smartphones before high school. The second one is no social media before 16. The third one is phone-free schools. And the last one is far more unsupervised play and childhood independence. Now, I think he cheats a little bit on the last one. The first 3 are specific reforms that we can look at where we can say, okay, as parents, we're going to say no smartphones before high school. And you can work together with other parents, so that's the norm for your students' group of friends. For things like phone-free schools, schools can step into that. Communities can say, hey, this is what we think is good. For no social media before 16, we can change the age at least which you're supposed to be on social media. Far more unsupervised play and childhood independence, I think, encompasses a lot of things. We'll get to that in a minute when we get some time to talk about it. But they fall into these 2 categories. The first one is correcting underprotection online. And the second one is incentivizing more real-world experience. We need less and better experience on screens and more and better experience in the real world. And so in the latter half of the book, Haidt plays this out by going through some different groups. He doesn't have as good a list as we have, but he talks about all the things that we see here. He talks about government, he talks about tech companies, he talks about parents, he talks about schools. As he looks at this list, he gives some places to start for some reform and change. There's so much more than I'll mention here, but I'll give you a few highlights. For the first type of response, correcting underprotection online, he says governments can do some simple things like raising that age of internet adulthood legally to 16 or 18 if it could be done, and asserting a duty of care on the tech companies that when harm comes from what's happening, there's a responsibility that comes. For the tech companies, he calls for improved age verification and refusing to be a part of the race to the bottom of the brainstem, that idea where we just want people to at their basis level, come back for more and more and more. For schools, his main push is to go phone-free. Can I pause here for a second? That means that we can't rely on them as we go through school, right? And I say this pointing right at myself, too, because in youth group, we have to deal with this all the time. We would say, hey, phones are not what's best for you guys, especially not until you're in high school. But middle schoolers and high schoolers, the only place that we're going to announce what we're doing is on Instagram. If you're not on Instagram, you can't keep up. Because it's easier for us that way, so we're stepping into our own collective action problem. We have to be willing to come up with some different solutions here. He asserts, my boy's school has gone to a class-based system where you turn in the phones at the beginning of class each time. He would say that that's not enough. In talking to my boys, they say it helps some. But he would suggest taking the phones at the beginning of the day and giving them back at the end of the day. You know what the biggest difficulty schools have with that is, as I talk to school leaders and as he talked to school leaders? Parents. Yeah. It's parents who want access to their kids in those moments. Believe it or not, I didn't have a cell phone, and my parents knew the number to call to talk to the school if there was a problem. And so we were able to have this interaction. If it's better for our students' focus and for their attention, for them to not have these things in their pocket, maybe there are more benefits than there are negatives for them not having their phones with them all the time. And so not having the phones can become a norm. Can I tell you, it doesn't take long for students to really love this. When I work with things in youth groups, sometimes we have retreats where we'll take phones away. We'll just say, don't bring them, whatever. This is just going to be a space where we're pausing on that. Can I say the first day is rough sometimes? But the second and third, it's amazing. I've seen kids, when the phones come back, say, yeah, I don't really want that yet. Because it's dragging attention that they've found ways to use and point toward something else. For parents, he's arguing wait until 8th. Wait until 8th grade to give a phone at least, or to give a flip phone if you need it before that, so all the distractions of the world aren't available on it. And he pushes for more monitoring and restrictions. I'll tell you, the way this works in my house, I'm sorry for the teens in here. I'm not really. I'm sorry for the teens in here if this isn't the way it's worked in your house yet. But the way it works in my house is my kids knew when they got that phone, 3 of the 4 have one now, they knew that it wasn't their phone. It was my phone, which means I can see it any time, and they should tell their friends that, because my Face ID is going to open it. And so that's going to be part of this thing, is that there's going to be an accountability on this because it's a shared space. Now, for us, that goes both ways. We have the same password on every phone in the house, including mine, right? And so we have this ability to interact with each other about what we're spending time on and how that works. So more monitoring and some restrictions that can happen that parents are suggesting. On the other side of things, Haidt gives suggestions on how they can incentivize real-world experience. I'll roll through these. A government can examine and clarify laws on neglect so that it's not a valid thing to call and say, hey, the kids are in the front yard, you should send the police. Neglect laws are needed, but they can also be used negatively, so how do we clarify them? We could design public spaces with children in mind, roads, neighborhoods, parks. Tech companies can redefine their customers so that they're thinking about the long-term win. Make people the customer instead of the product. Right now, we're the product that's being sold to, our attention is the product that's being sold to advertisers who are the customers. Schools can become more playful, more free play, better playgrounds with imaginative play. Parents can become a better gardener instead of a carpenter. Somebody, who was it that said they love gardening to relax? Gardening, sorry. Yes. Gardening is different than carpentry. I mean, maybe not in your garden. Maybe everything does exactly what you tell it to. But in my garden, I'm just setting up the system, and it's going to grow with help where it is. Carpentry, I measure twice and cut once, hopefully. Because everything has to be exact. It has to go exactly where I want it. A parenting style that looks at carpentry is saying, no, it's all going to be exactly this way. And it leads to everything being structured all of the time. Structure can be good. But what he's saying is there needs to be time without structure so we can learn how to solve problems ourselves. And so being a gardener is more setting up the situation and then watching things grow. And of course, stepping in to help and trim as we go along, because the next generation needs to know that they are both trusted and supported. The last thing that he talks about is building competence And he has a thing called Let Grow that he suggests to do some of this very thing, to be that gardener parent. But it's, all of this needs to be solutions that happen together. And so I have a couple questions for you as we wrap up that we're gonna spend a little bit of time on here. The first one, I want to ask for your help for just a moment. As I've been going around the region, the common discussion that I've been having is with church leaders about how churches can take place in this process. What does it look like for churches to be helpful in this? What does it look like for us to be part of the collective action solution? Haidt, as someone who's not a part of a community of faith, didn't give suggestions to churches. So we stop and say, hey, what should those be? And so I want to ask all of you, whether you are part of Brewster Baptist Church or another church or no church at all, as you think about the role of churches in a community, what is it that churches could do? What are some things churches could do to step in and partner in these problem areas to help with both the lack of a play-based childhood and the overabundance of a phone-based childhood? Some practical solutions. I know it's hard, but I'm trying to cheat here. I'm trying to gather your wisdom instead of just having to know everything on my own. And so I want you to divide into groups and just talk for a minute. Maybe you can come up with 2 or 3 things that you think, hey, it would be great if churches did this. On your mark, get set, go.
So you can't always take them. I mean, some of the classes they take them away, but like when we have our social times and stuff, we try to find us enough running around stuff that then they don't think about using their phone. Yeah. So, we played Ultimate Spoons the other night. Oh my god, I love it. So you just hide the spoons around the building, and then so whoever got the first 4, then they had to go and
Get out. That's so fun. That's cool.
In here, what are some things churches could do? Keep going.
And it's going to be okay.
Right.
Like, I don't want the phone calls saying, like, well, so-and-so didn't play well or something. Like, this is what we're letting them do.
That's the point. All right. I mean, that's what, we're so lucky, like, so many of our kids, like, friends live within like walking distance of our house, you know, and so they can just go back and forth and go, you know, Charlie and Courtney, you know, walk to each other's houses every day. And like,
We'll give you just a couple more minutes. What are some things that churches can do to help wrap up the conversation?
right, figure it out. Yeah, that's the thing. It's like they're just not allowed to figure it out anymore.
All right, everybody, it's idea time. We're in a church. A church brought this gathering together. We want there to be a collective action response. What role can churches play? What are some things churches can do to be part of the solution in this? Nate's got it. He's ready. What you got? You solving it all?
I can't say I solved it, but one thing that
You want me to grab the mic for you? I got it. I don't know if they could hear you in the back, so go ahead.
Right, so this might be a little bit controversial of me as the youth pastor to say, but one thing that Haidt brings up in the book that really resonated strongly with me is, and you alluded to it, right? Risky play, playgrounds, those sorts of things, right? I think it's actually a good idea for churches or schools or other community-oriented places where kids can play to have elements on a playground, right, or in an outdoor wooded area where kids can get hurt, right? Where they, right, to use that gardening illustration, you have a fenced-in area where kids can play on different activities, maybe with some supervision, but they have to learn over trial and error and self-awareness, where is the line between what is safe and what is risky? Yeah. What is the line between, okay, the way I play on this element, right, is going to lead to fun versus the way I'm playing on this element is going to lead to pain and potential injury, right, that bears consequences.
Well, I think this is one of those scenarios where I do a series with students that I call 2 lies and a truth instead of 2 truths and a lie, where we talk about how sometimes there will be something that's a lie that we'll believe, and we recognize that it's not the actual thing we should be believing, and we swing way past the truth to the lie on the other side, right? And I think we do that in this area. We have these 2 extremes that we could go to, and we need to find a helpful middle here in the area of playgrounds, right? We may not need the slides that have left marks on many of us for the rest of our lives to come back as the main part of the playground, right? But we probably don't want our slides to be 1 foot tall for 6th graders, right? We want there to be some risk to it. And as we play with that, what is that point where they're actually learning through the risky behavior, where they're having to do things together? You mentioned supervision. Yeah, there needs to be supervision. And yeah, there doesn't need to be supervision. How do we walk through that? And I think churches have a role to play in that, because we can offer some of those times and spaces for less structured time. Some of our kids are doing more things than they ever did before, but they're all structured practices and events and things, and there's not that unstructured time. Who else has something? What can churches do? All right, we got somebody else.
One thing our group talked about in different ways was just providing both a safe place and intergenerational connections. And church is one of the places that allows for people from very young ages to connect with people at an older age, and vice versa. That doesn't happen as much in schools or workplaces or things like that. And so maybe sharing a meal intergenerationally, things like that, just to create a safe space where people can connect face to face and have that interaction in person, where we're not on our phones and we're not, looking at, where we're not as isolated. So churches can hopefully provide a safe space for youth, but also just for across generations.
That's great. Who else has something they want to share? What are possible ways churches could step in and partner with the rest of the community as part of the collective action response? Yeah.
I think just maybe offering more like service projects, or like even like mission trips from time to time. You're going somewhere else in the world, or you're going somewhere else in the United States, just getting out of your own area and just seeing other people and other cultures and people who are in need, and just not always looking at yourself, but how can I help other people, and how can I learn new skills or work together with people, to accomplish something that, like, wow, this is really cool, look what we did, or, look what I learned from the people that I'm helping, things along those lines.
That's great. One of the things I love about service trips, about whether it's a mission trip 1,000 miles away or serving right in your neighborhood where you are, is it gives you this pause where you are kind of stepping out of that self-focus that we mentioned there for a little bit before, and it lets you reevaluate things and kind of see how things could be a little different. It helps you be a part of something bigger than yourself, right? And when you do that, it kind of gives you a picture of what a better way to live might be, a less distracted, a less self-focused, a less anxious way could be. I think that's something churches could do as a whole. If we started saying, hey, all these things that we're saying are important, community and being about something bigger than yourself, and these spiritual practices and all of these things that we have to walk through together, are things that churches should be good at. And yet far too often we're not showing a better way. We're just trying to get better at all the ways that exist around us, right? We're going to use the phone the best way we can. Well, we should. We should use the phone the best way we can. And we should recognize that there are alternatives to using the phone all the time in this space, right? What does that look like? I love that we can use YouVersion to read our Bible and to keep up on things and all of that. I don't love it if we don't put like do not disturb on, so that I get 14 notifications while I'm reading my Bible that I want to check. So there are differences here as we look at these focuses. Same thing can be true of studying for students. Same thing can be true of all sorts of different stuff. Any other ways that churches can be part of this? I got two. I'll start here.
So I'm going to follow up on what you had shared with us. And so she was talking about how she thinks in Worcester there's a collection of Catholic churches that have come together and have sports teams that are just as competitive as the regular non-church teams. And I grew up with that, where we had sports teams with our church that were competitive. But I think that's a great idea, because I think we've handed that over to our competitive sports. And the other thing that's in the back of my mind is when I went on a visioning trip down in Mexico, that's exactly what's happening in Mexico, is that they're creating something else, and then the churches are growing up behind it, whether it's an art studio or an orphanage or whatever. So I thought that was a great idea.
Great. Thank you.
So I think one of the things that's important to remember is that a lot of us grew up through the 80s, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah.
We know what worked, and we have sort of some experience with what didn't work, so I definitely don't want the slide. But the merry-go-round, love that. Jungle gym all day long. I'd also like to just, there was an ability for people to talk to each other as adults. So if your kid was sort of being a jerk, you could talk to the parent, or you could talk to the kid, and you didn't end up in a fight or in a Facebook brawl because you spoke to somebody else's kids. But to the question of what churches can do, I sort of piggybacking on that last comment, how cool would it be if churches weren't so isolated, and even 3 churches had a youth group, And each of those youth groups came together and did something that wasn't focused on the religious part of youth group, but created regular opportunities for people to do activities. Maybe that's community engagement, maybe that's peer development, maybe that's letting the younger kids interact with the older kids so they can show them what's coming up, in their life, what to look forward to, and some oversight from some youth pastors, or maybe even not a youth pastor, but just it's not being so isolated in your own sanctuary and looking around, because you've got all these mini isolated communities that if you pulled together, if each of those kids brought a couple of kids that were their friends, you'd have a huge group of kids that could all start to hear the same message.
Yeah, and that could start to step into some ways that are just a little bit less and a little bit less and a little bit less tied to the devices in our pockets and the screens that we're on all the time. But really, it's more than that, because I'm not here to just be anti-phones or anti-whatever. I'm here to be pro the mental health of this generation, pro the overall health of this generation. And what we're really talking about is that opportunity cost. If we can step out of the opportunities that are being robbed by us, there are some things we could step into that are so much better for us. These relationships that we're talking about, all of these different things. Can I give one suggestion to you of things that churches could do? It's going to be just totally mind-blowing. You ready for it? We could listen. We could listen to the community around us to see where there's difficulty in these spaces that we could help with our space and our people and all of the different things that exist, and we could listen to the next generation. I've heard a couple of times people say, the church is answering questions I'm not asking, right? Maybe we can listen to the next generation and say, what are the things you're actually asking? Where are the places where there are struggles here? Where are the difficulties that we can step into? What are the I think what we'll find is that the relationships that we can build as we listen will make it easy to see places where we can step in and work together and be part of a collective solution. The other thing that I wanted to give us a little bit of a chance to talk about today is the divide in that togetherness that can happen. The collective action solution requires connection. And so I want to just ask you, we won't divide into groups for this, but I want to ask you for just a second, what are the best ways that you have connected with other people? Ways you've gotten to know groups of friends. We're in a church, so I'll take church and small groups away from that. But what are some things you've done with people that have helped you connect? Who's got some? Playing games. Volunteering. Camping. Walking groups. Classes for old people at the college, not my words. Inviting people to dinner, yes. Food. You want to get to know me? Buy me lunch. No, that's all right. What else? Neighborhood block parties, yes. An adult league soccer team. Yes, sports can bring us together. And not together, but it can bring us together. What else? Community theater, community chorus. Here's the thing. I think a lot of times, there are great times when we should connect opportunities to come together. We did it tonight. We connected opportunity to come together. But sometimes we can overprogram this. A lot of this is about carrying conversations about the mental health of our generation that's coming up, about our own mental health, into all of these places we're already connecting. We feel isolated, but there are so many opportunities to connect and have conversations. We just have to take them. And so my encouragement to you is to not let this be the end of your time having these conversations. We'll provide a couple of ways for this to continue. One of them, there's that Zoom call that's next Tuesday at 7 o'clock. What I want you to do for that Zoom call, there are lots of things to process in this conversation, and we can't really talk back and forth as much as I'd like to when we're in this room. What the Zoom call will do, it's a chance for anybody who wants it. I'll be on, and if I'm the only one, that's great. But if you want to join and have continued conversation about this, give us your email and we'll send you a link for the Zoom call so that we can have some continued conversation about some collective action solutions, or maybe about some specific ways that we're seeing these problems show up. The other thing you can do is that you can email Nate if you forget to sign up on that. Nate's email address is right there. You can email Nate and you can ask him to connect you to this Zoom call that's going to be happening. You can also email Nate if you'd like to say, hey, I want to be a part of continued in-person conversations that happen here, because I know that the church is looking for ways to continue in conversations about this as we move forward. The other thing you can do is you can come right after our time together to the next room over here, to the fellowship hall, and we're actually going to go to round tables, and we've got 5 questions that we're going to talk about. We're going to just spend a little time talking together, and I'm going to give you a preview of one of them. It says, if you had an easy button and could put one of the 4 foundational reforms into action immediately, which one would you choose? If you had an easy button and could put one of the 4 foundational reforms into action immediately, which one would you choose? We'll talk about that one out loud in the group as we go over to the next space. I do want to tell you, if it's the third one that's about that more play, more interaction in the physical world, get specific with us. Don't stay as broad as it is there. Give me some specific things that you would shift and change. But we're looking at things that say, if you had an easy button, what would you change? I actually want to give you 2 minutes to preview that now. First thing that comes to mind, and it doesn't even have to be one of those 4 foundational reforms, but if you personally could do one thing differently based on this conversation, what would it be? Share it with your group you were talking to. Go. You got 2 minutes. One thing that you would do differently in this area. To help yourself, to help others. What's a change that you think would help you based on tonight? So those are the harm. Those are the harm. Can actually do. There are things that could actually happen. These 4 foundational reforms that were just up there are things that are possible. We can do these. There are changes that can be made. But there's one more thing that we need to do that I want to mention before we step out of here. We need to set the example. For those of you who are teens in here, you need to set the example for your peers and even for your parents sometimes. For those of you who are parents and grandparents, we need to set the example for the generations behind us. For those of you who are leaders in the community, we need to set the example in the community, because I was at a meeting with a group of school parents from the community and school leaders and town leaders, and we were talking about some of these challenges that exist and some of the difficulties that can come when we spend too much time on the phone. And one of the parents had the boldness to say, you know what? I think the problem is that they see me on mine all the time. I think the problem is they see me on mine all the time, and I'm modeling going to this when I'm stressed. I'm modeling going to this when I have a free moment. I'm modeling that checking what my updates are is the most important thing. And so we can set the example here. We can also set the example by stepping into these changes. If we just talk about this tonight, it's good to know a little bit more. But what if you gathered together with a few people that are in the room and said, hey, for our families, for our kids, for our community, this is something that could shift or change. We think it would be better in our area if we did this. We think it would be better for our kids if we did this. We think Brewster needs this to exist to help our kids. Stepping into these practical things is the huge difference in this. Because can I tell you, our students don't need to hear from us that it can be a problem. I know, I've got 4 sons. It feels like I have to tell them all the time that being on your phone too much or being on your devices too much is a problem. But when I talk to other students, what I hear is an acknowledgement that they know there's something that's being missed. They know there are negative effects. They just can't be the only one. And so how can we provide spaces where we can just take a little bit of childhood back? Where we can just take a little bit of our attention back? And where we can take another step and another step and another step in the right direction? Look, I know there were a lot of different directions that we went tonight because there are a lot of pieces of this. That's why it's so complex. It's why we don't just do it right away because getting together to decide on collective action is not always easy. But taking a next step is. Figuring out things that can be a little bit helpful can be incredibly easy. We just have to actually do it. And so what are the things that you can do as you step out that will help you be a part of the collective solution? In whatever area, in whatever group, in whatever context, you have some influence. And how can you work with others so that you're not trying to do it just on your own? My hope is that these conversations continue. Please come over to the fellowship hall so that we can continue some of these conversations with some snacks later. I heard food is a good way to get to know people. And then also, if you need additional resources, we have a slide that I'll leave up that have some of the other resources on this. For the anxious generation, it's super simple, theanxiousgeneration.com. You'll see way more information than this and all sorts of resources that exist. I have not tried all the resources. I can't vouch for all of them. I can tell you I've tried some of them, and they're great. After Babel is the Substack with all the research and information and conversations that are happening. If you want to dive into this, you can do this there. Let Grow that we mentioned is something that Haidt has worked with, letgrow.com. You can look toward. I referenced the Springtide Research Institute. They collect some great information. They give some suggestions on how to use it. Some I like more than others, but they're good at collecting the right information and asking the right questions. The Fuller Youth Institute, they've got some great resources on how parents can faithfully step into this, how churches, how students can faithfully step into these things, and they do great research themselves. 10x10 is bringing churches and ministries together to deal with things like this for the next generation, and you've got my email and phone number there. Feel free to reach out. I think you're seeing that you're not done just because you came here tonight. You're introduced or continuing a conversation that we keep needing to have, and bit by bit, we're going to get to a spot where we can implement some of these things and see a real change for this generation. I just want to leave you one more time with a reminder that there is hope. Because what I'm seeing is that this generation is saying, wait a second, all the things that we've been told are going to work aren't working for us. We got to find something better. And we're seeing so many good things in the next generation, especially even in this past year. Things that leaders around the region and around the country have been saying, hey, we think this is coming. They've started to happen. Be excited for the hope that can exist for this generation, because if we can use all of these resources as tools instead of falling into the traps that they can set for us, it'll be amazing to see what can happen as we connect together and come up with some of these responses. And so thank you for being here. I was glad to be here. Thank you, Brewster Baptist, for inviting me here today. I hope you had some good conversation. Please exchange information, connect with people so that you can keep the conversation up. And please do, everyone's welcome. Come and continue the conversation in there. You're going to gather at round tables, and you're going to give some practical things that can help you as you move out from today. On your mark, get set, go.